Hello, everyone. Again, thank you very much for coming to the Smart2Move booth. It's certainly an honor and a privilege for myself to be in front of you today, and especially joined by Mr. Greg Rose, co-founder of TPI. Greg and I have been involved in development of the Power Level 2 course, obviously within the whole fold of TPI, from Level 1 through all the different tracks, the junior, the medical, the golf, the fitness, and the power track, which we started 15 years ago, which is addressing all things power and speed with respect to golf. Everything from technique, physical preparedness to equipment, and which has progressed into our Level 3 power program, which is real heavy on force and pressure, which we think is very relevant in today's golf swing, and one of the biggest vectors for golf performance, especially distance, that we see that is actionable for the golf coach and the player. Today we're at Smart2Move. We're going to be talking about force and pressure and the torques involved. Through the last number of years at TPI, we've had the ability to capture the kinematic data, which Greg has been involved in through the last 20 years, originally with AMM system with Phil Cheatham, and which we use today. We have a massive database of the kinematic data, but we've been acquiring a very, very large database from the best players in the world of kinetic data, which is the forces, our ground reaction forces, and the associated torques that come along with our ground reaction forces. So we're going to go over some of our tour observations and some of our implications and show you, some of the things that we see potentially with players when, these forces aren't happening perhaps at the right time with the right magnitude, and some of these things we can do to influence that. But we want to talk about some of our PGA Tour observations, because just like kinematics, when we see the best players in the world doing something, we take notice, and it's the exact same thing with kinetics. When we see the best players in the world doing something, we take notice, and we can share some of these relationships with you. And we have a significant database of PGA Tour players, European Tour players, and LPGA players as well.
Yeah, and guys, just to let you know, we're kind of unique in Titleist in that we're very much an open book. All the data we collect, we're happy to share. So if you guys have questions, we do have the largest database of professional players and freaks like him, long drivers in the world. So hopefully we'll be able to highlight some of those cool things that we've learned by looking at these. I'd like to start just real quick. How many of you have force plates now? Okay. And how many of you, this is your first introduction to force plates? Okay, a couple. Everybody else is kind of somewhere in the middle? All right, so I think we should real quickly just talk about why this matters and why you want to use force plates. We have all the tools at TPI, right? And Mark Blackburn and I were doing a podcast a couple months ago, and somebody asked me, they said, hey, if you could only take one piece of technology with you in the future, what would it be? And we both looked at each other at the same time. We both said, force plate? That's probably what we would go with. And the reason I say that, not because I'm at the Smart2Move booth, it's because I always say before you open your mouth and tell a player some advice, you should know three basic things, right? You should know what they're doing, you should know how they're doing it, and you should know why they're doing it. Can we all agree with that? So how do you figure out what somebody's doing? So if you want to know what Jason does in his swing, it's pretty obvious. We take a video. I can see what he's doing from a video. I can get more advanced than video. I can do 3D motion capture. That tells me, again, what he's doing, right? If I take a launch monitor, again, gives me an idea of what he's doing. I can see how he's creating the spin of the ball. So what is very important? But if you send me, and like Jason said, people look at me as the kinematic sequence 3D person. People send me their 3D all the time, and they're like, hey, here's my player's 3D. What should we do? And I'll just reply back every time. I have no idea. You just told me what they're doing. I don't know why or how. I need to know why or how to actually be able to implement correctives, right? So that's what they're doing. It's very important to know that. If I want to know why they're doing something, well, now we're going to do physical screen. We're going to actually ask them concept, mental. Those are things, so some of the big whys somebody moves the way they move. Physical can be a huge problem, right? But one of the most important things is to know how they are moving. If you want to know how somebody feels when they swing, like if I want to step into his body and feel what it feels like to be Jason Zuback, the only way I can get close is by looking at how he creates forces from the ground. So by understanding the force plates, I literally feel like it's the best technology to be able to step into your player's body and feel what it feels like. So what I want to do is I want to just cut to the chase and show you, after a lot of years of research, what I think is the most important from a force plate. Okay? So first of all, the forces, there's a bunch of them. We're going to talk about them, right? There's basically 6. There's 3 forces, 3 torques, but there's really only a couple that really matter, right? They all matter, but you'll see what I mean here in a second. If I look at the best players in the world, they've got options, right? You've got options. You got forces that take the club and move it up, and you've got forces that move the club down. I've got forces that take the club behind me, and I got forces that take the club in front of me. The path that the club goes on is 100% created by the forces you're creating on the ground, right? So if you see somebody where the club is too far behind them, and you want to know why they have a lot of horizontal torque, they're trying to get the club back in front of them, right? But we can kind of see that. We can see that from the ground. What do the best players in the world do normally? Here's what we call the kinetic sequence. The kinetic sequence is the sequence of forces that we see if I look at the world's best players, right? Here's what they do. Take a player, million backswings, right? I can do a Matt Wolff backswing. I can do a Tiger Woods backswing. The backswing, I don't care. When they get to the top of the backswing, here's where the typical kinetic sequence kicks in, okay? First thing you're going to see on almost every player is you're going to see a lateral force. They're moving towards the target, right? This is like a pitcher. The pitcher, of course, is going to step towards the hitter. They're not going to spin first. That would make no sense, right? We can literally see that on the force plate is your first motion moving towards the target. Now, why does lateral force matter? Why does a pitcher want to step? Just remember, when you move lateral, you increase how hard you hit the ground. Why do I want to increase how hard I hit the ground? When I hit the ground, what does the ground do? The ground hits back. That's called the ground reaction forces. That's what we're measuring on these, right? So the first thing you're going to see is you're going to see a lateral weight shift. When they laterally weight shift, it actually brings the club which way? Down. Brings the club down. If you don't go lateral first, a lot of times you'll see this first. Do we want that first? We typically don't want that first. Typically we want, as the player is stepping, we want the club to drop so that we can get on plane, which is obviously a pretty important thing in the game of golf, right? So that lateral weight shift brings the club down. The second thing you're going to see, and maybe I'm stating Captain Obvious, is once you bring the club down, now what am I going to do? Now I'm going to start rotating. Now you'll see horizontal torque, right? So you'll see twisting. Twisting will be the second bit. And then, which is kind of different, but once you understand why this happens, so first thing is lateral, second thing is twist, and then the third thing is vertical jump. And guys like the gentleman standing next to me have mastered these forces, and that vertical force is one of the key indicators for creating power in the golf swing. So the first thing we do with a force plate, if you're gonna get up here and look at your swing, the first thing I would do is I'd look at your sequence. Just, are you in sequence? Pretty simple. We can bring up a graph here. You can see each of the graphs corresponds to one of those forces or torques I just said. The bottom one, you can see where this one peaks. That's lateral. I'm looking to see what peaks first. Does this peak, or this peak? This peaks first. Well, that's lateral force. That means this player is shifting weight laterally first. The club is dropping. That's a good sign. That's what I want to see first. Now I keep going, and the next thing that peaks is the yellow one here. Well, guess what? That's twisting. So now they're going to twist, which is what I want to see. And then the third one that comes into play, you can see it clearly over here, there's the vertical. So the first thing I see on this player, and I don't know this player, but I go, hey, I like that sequence. That's a good sequence. I want to make this really, really clear. That's the first thing we look at. There's 3 steps here. Step 1 is we look at the sequence. There's a million things we look at. I'm just saying this is 101. If you're getting on a force plate, this is where I think you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. We look at sequence first, and we'll look at some bad ones in a second. The second thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at the magnitude. Right? I want to see, okay, so you got the right sequence. Do you do it a little or do you do it a lot? Right? So looking at magnitudes, typically what we're going to see, I always say, I'm going to test you right now. Who's the best basketball player of all time? Thank you, Michael Jordan. What number is Michael Jordan? 23. Lateral average on PGA Tour is 23% of your body weight. That's how hard they're pushing. I'm weird. That's how I remember this. 23 is lateral. That's number 1. If I look at twisting, how hard do they twist? That's a torque. Average is around 19% of your body weight. That's what we see on tour. So 23% this way, 19% this way. And then when we get to vertical, average on tour is roughly twice your body weight. It's about 198%, right? So you should be almost pushing twice your body weight with your vertical. So I look at those magnitudes to see how's this person's magnitudes. How are we doing here? 21. I like 23. They're in the zone. They're in the zone of lateral, so they're getting a good push over here. I look at the torque. All 3 look like we got a good sequence. We got good magnitude. Now the third one And this is not in order of importance. The third one that I think is probably the most important, and I think Jason would agree with me, is the timing of when you do all of these, especially the last one. In other words, if I look at the best players in the world, if I look at Jason, and he's a great example, if I watch his kinetic sequence, he's going to go lateral, he's going to twist, and he's going to jump, and he's going to do all of that before the shaft is vertical on the downswing. This is the most important thing that we've learned from force plates. Newton described this in his first law: forces perceive motion. You need to create the force before you start to move, right? So these forces are happening before the player moves. If you want to have enough time to get those ground reaction forces to the club, you need to do it early, because so now I can transfer through my body to the club. If you do it late, they don't make it to the club, and you're not using the ground reaction forces. So we're always looking to see, let's go to the vertical. We'll go to the last one. We'll go to the last one right there, and I look at this, and I look where the club is. And I go, this guy, he had me. I was like, I got sequence is great, magnitude is great. And I look at that, and I go, that's too late. Shaft's parallel to the ground. I'm like, it's going to take a lot of effort to get all of that energy to the club head, and he could potentially hit it a lot farther. Like I said, if I look at Jason, I mean, most of our long drive guys, the shaft's like here when they're at peak vertical, right? So we're talking like 0.08, if we want to be exact, 0.08 seconds before impact is typically when we see vertical force peaks out. If it's, hey, I'm seeing it at 0.04, I'm like, dude, there's not enough time to get it to the club, right? So my scanning phase is sequence, magnitude, and then when does the last one occur?